The dome of crystal hung above them like a frozen storm. 3 moons watched through the high glass. 300 faces watched from the tiered balconies below. None of them moved, none of them breathed. A throne floated unsupported at the far end of the great hall. A queen descended from it 1 step at a time in a white dress she had not worn in 12 years. White on this world was the color of choosing. The man waiting for her did not look like a man who had been chosen for anything. His shoulder was wrapped in linen that had been white an hour ago. Red bloomed through the cloth in slow, steady circles. His knees were trembling. He had not let them give out. She stopped close enough to smell the night bloom on her own perfume, close enough that his blood touched her glove. She lifted her hand. She pressed it to his chest. Part 1. The crystal hall held its breath. 300 faces, silent, watching. Reeve Calder stood at its center, bandage white at his shoulder, red blooming through the linen in slow concentric rings. His knees should have given out an hour ago. They hadn't, because she was walking down. Queen Siren descended from the floating throne 1 step at a time, silver hair catching the dome light, pearl skin glowing soft, long ears drawn high with the weight of what she was about to do. She stopped in front of him, close enough that he could smell the night bloom perfume she wore, close enough that his bandage stained her white gloves when she lifted her hand to his chest. The first time she said, "You chose me blind." The hall did not breathe. Today she said, "I choose you," with my eyes wide open. Cut to black. 30 days earlier, the transport hummed. It had been humming for 17 hours, through a wormhole that bent space in ways Reeve's stomach refused to forgive, through 3 docking checkpoints, through a customs scan that registered his pulse, his sweat, his fear, and assigned each of them a polite numerical value. Now it hovered above a city made of light. Reeve pressed his palm against the viewport. Cool, smooth, real. Beneath him, Valtora Prime spread like a postcard from a fever dream. Violet oceans, silver continents, 3 moons hanging in a sky the color of bruised plums. It was beautiful. It was very far from home. He had wanted that. He had asked for that. He had practically begged for it, because home was small, because home echoed, because in Washington, in Geneva, in every corridor of the diplomatic corps, people still lowered their voices when he walked past, still glanced, still remembered. Marcus Lehrer. Reeve closed his eyes. The name came whether he asked for it or not. The name came in the shower, in meetings, at 3 in the morning when his ceiling fan made the wrong sound. Marcus Lehrer, 61, career diplomat, 2 grandchildren, a man who had trusted Reeve with 1 foolish private complaint about his marriage, a man Reeve had repeated that complaint to, in bed beside a woman he thought he loved, who turned out to work for a rival faction, who turned that complaint into a press cycle, which turned it into a resignation, which turned it into a quiet weeknight, and a quiet apartment and a quiet bottle of pills. Reeve had not pulled the trigger. He had simply loaded it. He opened his eyes. The viewport showed him the palace now, tall, crystalline, singing with its own light. He pressed his forehead against the glass and whispered to no one, "Don't break anything new." The transport bay smelled of ozone and ginger. Reeve descended the ramp into a corridor of pale stone that seemed to glow from inside. His ceremonial robes adjusted themselves around his shoulders, pulling, smoothing, tucking. The fabric had small, clever fingers sewn into it somewhere, and he was choosing not to think about that. An elderly Valtoran waited at the corridor's end, silver hair, tall ears that drooped slightly at the tips, the kind of face that had spent 80 years apologizing for other people's behavior. Ambassador Calder, I am Aldrin Thorell. I will be your guide today. Mr. Thorell, Aldrin, please. Aldrin. The old man's ears tilted. A Valtoran gesture, Reeve had been told, meant warm greeting in informal contexts. You look pale, Ambassador. I've been told my species reacts to wormholes the way fish react to bicycles. Aldrin's ears shivered. Was that a laugh? Reeve hoped that was a laugh. Walk with me, Aldrin said. We have time. The ceremony does not begin for another hour. The ceremony. Reeve's stomach reminded him about the wormhole. They walked. Crystal columns rose around them like frozen waterfalls. The floor glowed softly, under each step lighting where their feet would land before they landed. A small kindness from the architecture. Reeve noticed it, noticed everything. Old habit. Diplomats who didn't notice tended to eat condiments by the bowl. A servant came around the corner, old, hunched, her ears small and short, marking her as common-born. She was carrying a tray of crystal goblets, stacked high, too high. She was hurrying because someone had told her to hurry. She tripped on the lip of the rug. The tray pitched. Reeve moved. It wasn't decision. Decision came afterward when his hands were already under the tray, when his knees were already bending, when his diplomatic robes were already gathering dust on the polished floor. 3 goblets had fallen, 2 had broken, the rest tilted dangerously, and he caught them, and he settled them, and he set the tray gently down. Forgive me, the old woman was saying, voice trembling, both hands at her throat. Sir, Ambassador, forgive me. For what? I have shamed you. You haven't. Sir, you haven't. Look at me. She looked at him. Her eyes were the color of wet bark, tired, frightened of consequences he didn't yet understand. It's only glass, he said. I broke a teapot when I was 9 and my mother cried for an hour. Glass is glass. Are you hurt? No, sir. Then nothing happened. Go on. She went, quickly, looking back twice as if she expected someone to call her back and punish her later. Reeve straightened. Aldrin was watching him. What? Reeve asked. Nothing, Ambassador. You're looking at me like I just sprouted a second head. You are an unusual sort of ambassador, that is all. Because I helped someone pick up a tray. Because you knelt while doing it. Reeve frowned. He had not noticed kneeling. He had noticed needing to be lower than the tray. He had not noticed the politics of that lowness. Aldrin's ears tilted slightly, and the old man turned and continued walking, and Reeve followed. He almost missed it. The small face. Behind the column, a child, maybe 8. Tall ears for his small head, wide bark brown eyes, a servant's smock too big at the shoulders. He had been watching the broken glass and the kneeling man, and now he was watching Reeve walk by. Reeve slowed. The boy went still as a held breath. Reeve dug into the pocket of his robes. The robes had given him a pocket. He had not requested a pocket. He pulled out a small foil-wrapped square. Caramel. He'd been hoarding 3 of them from the transport's hospitality kit. He kept them for emergencies. He defined emergencies loosely. He held the caramel out. The boy didn't move. Reeve set it on the floor, stood up, walked away. He did not look back to see if the boy took it. He was wrong to assume no one else looked. Far above them, on a throne that floated unsupported in the dome of the great hall, a woman with silver hair watched the small foil square glint on the polished stone, watched the small hand dart from behind the column, watched the caramel disappear into a pocket too big for it. She tilted her ears once, and she smiled. No one saw her smile. That was the point. The corridor opened into a waiting chamber, low couches, soft amber light, a small fountain in the center that flowed upward instead of down, water defying its own nature in a column 3 feet high. Aldrin gestured Reeve to a seat. "We have some minutes. May I explain again?" "You may, slowly, because I'm still hoping I misunderstood the briefing the first 6 times." "You did not misunderstand. That is the answer I was afraid of." Aldrin folded his hands, long fingers, steady fingers, the hands of a man who had been steady for a great many decades. "The choosing is one of our oldest ceremonies, Ambassador. It dates from a time when alliances between noble houses required a public gesture of trust. A man, or sometimes a woman, would be blindfolded. Candidates from the great families would present themselves. The chosen one would speak only briefly. The selection was made on voice, on presence, on the parts of a person that cannot be polished into politics. And it's still binding, in law, yes." Reeve's stomach did the wormhole thing again, but it has not been used as a true binding in over 2 centuries. It is now a gesture, a courtesy. The 7 candidates know they will not actually marry. The chosen one receives a small honor. Her family receives social benefit. You participate. You demonstrate respect for our customs. Everyone applauds. You return to your duties. And what if I don't participate? Then we conclude regrettably that Earth considers itself above Valtoran tradition. There it is. There what is Ambassador, the trap, wrapped in courtesy. Aldrin's ears drooped further. He looked for a moment very old. "It is not a trap. We invited you because we wish to honor you. The complication is that honor in our culture comes with weight." Reeve sat back. He thought about Marcus Lehrer, honor with weight. He thought about the press cycle and the resignation and the bottle of pills. He thought about the funeral he had not been allowed to attend. He thought about the wife who had stared through him at the reading of the will as if he were a piece of furniture that had moved itself to an unfortunate location. He could not refuse this. He could not afford another international incident. He could not afford to be the ambassador who would not honor a host's request. How many candidates? 7. All willing, several quite eager. There is political prestige in being selected by an off-world ambassador, even symbolically. And I just touch the one I want. You speak with them, they speak with you, then you walk the line and choose by touch. And then we share wine and everyone goes home. Then you share wine and everyone goes home. Reeve looked at the upward fountain, water disobeying water. Aldrin, yes, Ambassador. If this is so symbolic, why does it feel like swallowing a rock? Aldrin did not answer for a long moment. Then he said very softly, because some symbols, Ambassador, remember what they used to mean. The Great Hall could have eaten 3 cathedrals. The ceiling was a dome of living crystal, lit from inside by a soft pulse that matched the rhythm of breath. A floating throne sat at the far end, raised on no visible support. Around the throne, balconies climbed, in tiers packed with Valtoran nobles in robes that shifted color in the dome light. Their ears were jeweled, their hands were folded, their eyes were on him, all of them, on him. Reeve had stood in front of cameras before. He had spoken to the United Nations. He had once, at 28, briefed 3 sitting heads of state on a trade agreement that he had personally written. This was worse, because they weren't waiting for what he would say. They were waiting for what he would choose. Aldrin guided him to the center of the floor. A semicircle was forming. 7 women. They entered one by one, each through a different archway, each draped in a different color, deep blues and silvered greens and warm sun amber. Their ears were ringed in family jewels. Their eyes flickered to Reeve, then away, then back. He counted them. 1, 2, 3. He thought about how strange it was that he was counting human-shaped women on an alien planet, and that the only difference was the ears. 4, 5, 6. The sixth caught his eye and held it a fraction too long. Tall, sharp-jawed, ears so heavily ringed they sang faintly when she moved. The family rings of Kor. He had been briefed on that name. Lord Valon Kor, former right hand of the dead king, powerful, dangerous, patient in the way that snakes are patient. This was his daughter, Lady Myrel. She did not smile at Reeve. She measured him. 7. The last candidate took her place, younger than the rest, hands fisted at her sides. The cut of her robe was different from the others, less couture, more uniform. A pin at her collar Reeve recognized from his briefings as a service mark, a soldier. She was furious about being here. Reeve almost laughed. He liked her instantly. Aldrin stepped close. "Are you ready, Ambassador Calder?" Reeve looked once more toward the shadowed throne. He could see the suggestion of a figure seated there. He could see a sleeve, the arc of a long ear, nothing more. "Ready," he said, as a man with no good options. The servants brought the blindfold. It was strange in his hand when he took it, heavier than fabric should be, threaded with something he couldn't quite see. Recording, he assumed. Cultural archive. The eyes of history about to be tied across his own. He lifted it. He stopped, because for half a second he thought of Marcus Lehrer's funeral, the one he hadn't attended, the one where his name had been muttered in the back row. He thought very clearly, "Don't break anything new." Then he tied the blindfold across his eyes. The world went dark. The dark did things to sound. The hum of the palace, which he hadn't quite noticed before, became a pressure, power moving through crystal conduits. Breath, cloth, someone's stomach gurgling faintly with nerves, the faintest distant click of jewelry against jewelry as a noble shifted on a balcony 3 stories above. He had not realized how much he relied on eyes to filter the world. Now, everything came in at once. "The candidates will speak in turn," Aldrin said at his left elbow. "Listen to their words, to their presence. When all have spoken, you will walk the line and choose by touch. Do you understand?" "I understand." Reeve said that this is either going to be a great story for dinner parties or a diplomatic incident that gets me recalled to Earth. A few small laughs from the gallery. He did not have to see them to know which faces they came from. "Begin," Aldrin said. The first voice came from ahead of him. "Ambassador Calder," young, polished, the cadence of someone who had been trained to negotiate before she was trained to walk. "I am Lady Myrel Kor. My house oversees the mineral exports of Valtora III. A union between our houses, however symbolic, would mark a profitable beginning for Earth's trade relations within the inner colonies. I look forward to making your further acquaintance." She sat down inside her words like a chair at a board meeting. Reeve nodded politely. He had heard better proposals from copy machines. Aldrin guided him a step to the right. The second voice was warmer. "Hello, I'm Lady Neyra. I study plants. Not just our plants. I have a small greenhouse with samples from 17 different worlds. Do you know that Earth's sunflowers actually turn to follow your star across the sky? I have 3 growing from seeds your supply ships brought. They are quite lovely. I would like to show you sometime. That sounds significantly more interesting than mineral exports Lady Nera. She laughed, soft, real. He liked her. He would not choose her, but he liked her. Step. The third voice was quiet. I am Lady Threen. My family makes cloth. I am sorry. I do not know what else to say. I was told to come, and I came. Reeve felt a small, sharp ache for her. What kind of cloth? He asked. What kind of cloth does your family make? The kind for the robes, the ambassador. You are wearing one. This robe, yes. It keeps trying to adjust itself, yes. It feels like very small hands. A pause. That is the silk thread weave. Sir, ambassador, it is meant to make the wearer comfortable. Tell your family the silk thread weave is excellent. Tell them I said so. He heard her breath catch. He moved on. The fourth and fifth voices ran together. One spoke at length about her family's history with a diplomatic core. One spoke at greater length about her collection of pre-unification glasswork. Reeve made polite sounds. He was listening, but the dark was beginning to tire him. The hum of the palace pressed at his ears. The robe's tiny hands shifted at his sleeve. He was very far from home. He felt the rise of something close to grief and could not have said why. The sixth voice cut through it. My name is Lady Halcyon. I won't waste your time. I am here because my mother told me to be here. I will smile and curtsy at the appropriate moments. Beyond that, ambassador, I assume nothing. I think you should not assume anything either. A few startled gasps from the gallery. Reeve smiled behind the blindfold. Lady Halcyon, thank you for the honesty. It is the least I can offer, ambassador. The mineral exports are taken. A wave of laughter sharper than the first. The hall, he realized, had a sense of humor when it was a loud one. Step. The seventh voice, furious, restrained, short. Captain Vesna, reconnaissance fleet, 6 years of service. My father insisted I come. I wanted on record that I did not volunteer and that there is no offense in my saying so. Nothing personal, ambassador. I would simply prefer to be on my ship. Reeve laughed out loud. What class ship? Valiant cruiser, deep space recon. I served 3 months on a research vessel during my training. I threw up for the first week every time we jumped. They called me the Green Ambassador. At least you're honest about that. It was hard to hide. I had a small bucket. I named it. A pause. What did you name it? Steve. She laughed. It was a sharp, surprised laugh, the kind a person makes when she has not laughed in a long time and is briefly startled by the sound of her own delight. Reeve liked her too. He thought in that moment that he might choose her. Sharp, honest, done with the theater. They could share wine, share the obligatory smile, share the relief of mutual contempt for the ceremony, and then he could walk away and never burden her with anything more. It was a reasonable choice. It was an ambassador's choice. Aldrin began to guide him back toward the start of the semicircle. The ceremony was about to enter its final phase, and then he heard it. A breath. To his right. Outside the semicircle. Reeve turned his head. The hall had been quiet. Now it was a different quiet. A held quiet. The quiet of 1,000 people who had just realized that something was about to happen that they had not been told to expect. The voice spoke. You look absolutely terrified, Ambassador Calder. Rich, mature, warm at the edges. There was a smile inside the voice, and underneath the smile, something older. Authority that had been weathered into something kinder than it should have been. Terrified is a strong word, Reeve said. He surprised himself with the steadiness of his own voice. What would you prefer? Concerned about the potential for spectacular failure in front of witnesses who can report back to multiple star systems. A laugh, soft, unguarded. The gallery rustled. He heard it, the whispered intake of 300 breaths at once. Whoever this was, she did not laugh in public often. Tell me, Ambassador, she said, is this how your people usually approach partnerships standing blind, listening to recitations of qualifications, selecting on the basis of a 30-second speech? Not usually. How then? We have a thing called dating, where two people meet and gradually discover over several expensive dinners that they cannot stand each other. Another laugh. Behind the blindfold, Reeve felt his shoulders drop for the first time since he had landed. And do you usually fail at this dating? She asked. Spectacularly. How spectacularly? I once told a woman I loved her in the middle of a power outage because I thought she had just told me she was pregnant. She had actually just said she was going to make popcorn. Oh, it was a long night. I imagine. He could hear her now, where she was standing, the acoustics of her voice outside the semicircle, slightly to his right, the position of an observer who had stepped just inside. Tell me truly, Ambassador, she said, why did you accept this post? Why travel across stars to represent your world to ours? He should have said something polished, honor, duty, the privilege of representation. He did not. Because Earth is small, he said, when you have failed publicly enough. I wanted to be somewhere my mistakes did not echo. Maybe that is selfish, using diplomacy as personal escape, but it is the truth. A pause, a long one. That is not selfish, Ambassador. No, that is human. We all carry histories we would rather not. The question is whether we let them define us or simply inform us. He felt something behind his eyes that he was not going to let out in front of 300 witnesses. Who are you? He asked. Someone curious to see what you value when appearances are stripped away. Someone who wonders if your species judges by surfaces or depths. And if I judge by depths, then you are wiser than most, or a very good liar. I'm a bad liar. Are you? Ask anyone in the Earth Diplomatic Corps. They have a small file. It is titled, Things Calder Says When He Should Not. She laughed again, and he loved the sound of it. That was not the right word. Loved. He scrambled for a better one. Liked. He liked the sound of it. He liked it the way you like a kind of music you did not know you needed until it arrived. Tell me about Earth, she said. What about it? What do you miss most? He thought. He thought of his mother's kitchen, of the way the linoleum cracked in one specific corner, of his brother teaching him to surf at 16 on a beach where the dawn came up green through the kelp, of standing at Marcus Lehrer window before everything went wrong, looking out at a maple tree that had turned overnight from green to gold, of the way an old colleague had once handed him a cup of tea on a cold afternoon and called him kid and meant it as love. He did not say most of that. He said the light, the way evening light looks in a room I grew up in. She did not answer for a moment. When she did, her voice had gone very soft. Yes, just that. Yes. He understood with a clarity that startled him that whoever this woman was, she missed a light somewhere too, a room, a corner of a life that had stopped being available to her. And you, he said, who are you when the crown comes off? He had not meant to say crown. He had not consciously meant to say it. Somewhere in the blindfold and the silence, his mouth had moved ahead of his thinking, and he had said it, and the hall went silent in a different way again. She did not answer right away. When she did, her voice was steady. Someone who has not been able to take the crown off in 12 years. The hall did not breathe, and who finds occasionally that she would like to remember what her own voice sounds like when it is not being used to govern. He took a step toward the voice. Not a thought, a step. Aldrin's hand was no longer on his elbow. Aldrin had given up on guidance. You set this up, Reeves said quietly. Did I? You stood in the semicircle. I stood near the semicircle. You spoke when I addressed you. I am told that is how speaking works. He took another step. He could smell her now. Something faintly floral, something faintly spiced, like a garden at the edge of evening. You knew the law would consider you a candidate. I have read the law, Ambassador. I have read it many times. Why? Because I wanted to see, she said, if Earth's ambassador would choose what was loud or what was true. He thought of Marcus Lehrer. He thought of every loud, glittering, polished room he had ever walked into. He thought of how easy it had always been to mistake polish for truth. He thought of the woman in his bed who had laughed at his jokes and held his hand and reported every word he said to the people who paid her. He thought of an old woman who had dropped a tray. He thought of a small boy behind a column. He thought of caramel in a pocket too big. Aldrin, he said. Yes, Ambassador. Time is up, isn't it? You are very near the end of the ceremony's allowance, yes. Then I would like to make my choice. Yes, Ambassador. By touch. Yes, Ambassador. Of the candidate I have selected, a long breath somewhere at his left. Aldrin sounded very tired. Yes, Ambassador. By touch. Of the candidate you have selected. Reeve took one more step toward the voice. He felt the warmth of her furs, then the cloth. His hand found her shoulder. The fabric beneath his palm was heavier than the others had worn, smoother, woven through with something that pulsed faintly under his fingers as if the cloth itself were alive and listening. He set his hand there. She went very still. This is my choice, he said. He said it loud enough for the hall to hear. He said it to her. You magnificent fool, she whispered. Her voice was shaking. It was shaking with something that was not all fear. Do you have any idea, she said, what you have just done? I made a choice. You made a choice that cannot be unmade. It's symbolic. Aldrin said so 8 times. It was symbolic, she said, until you touched a shoulder that was never supposed to be touched. His hand did not move. He could not have made it move. Someone remove his blindfold, she said. Her voice had changed, steadied, risen. It carried now to the dome, to the balconies, to the highest rings of the great hall. Hands fumbled at the back of Reeves' head. The knot loosened. The blindfold dropped. Light flooded back in. The first thing he saw was her face, long ears jeweled in silver, pearl skin glowing faintly in the dome light the way the inside of a shell glows, eyes the color of warm honey held against a candle, and inside that honey a sharpness like quartz, silver hair drawn up in braids threaded with stars. She was older than he had imagined, not old, but older than the candidates, older than him. There was a small line at the corner of each eye and a small line between her brows, and the lines were not flaws. The lines were a record of someone who had been required to be wise. His hand was still on her shoulder. His brain was still trying to assemble what his eyes were telling it, the ear jewelry, the cut of the robes, the way every noble in the hall had risen to his or her feet without command, the way Aldrin Thero was holding his old hands together as if to keep them from shaking. He had been briefed on this face. In one slim folder, in a meeting that had felt at the time like ceremony. Queen Cyrene, widow of King Halen, sovereign of Valtora Prime, sovereign of 7 colony worlds, sovereign of the very floor he was standing on, the hand on her shoulder was his. "Oh," Reeve said. His voice came out very small. "Oh, yes, Ambassador. Oh, no, yes." The hall broke, not slowly, not by degrees, all at once, 300 voices rising into a wave of outrage that made the dome light flicker. Nobles shouted, family heads bellowed. A young lord in heavy earrings actually stepped forward as if to physically pry Reeve's hand from his queen's shoulder and then stopped because she was looking at him. She did not say anything. The look was enough. He retreated. "This is invalid," a woman in deep purple robes called from a balcony. The queen was presiding, not participating. Human ignorance cannot bind our sovereign to a law meant for common selections. "I was not presiding," Cyrene said. The voice was calm. The voice was knife calm. "My lady, you were on the throne." The entire hall saw. "You saw a throne. You did not see me on it." A different voice now from a different balcony, deeper, older, the voice of a man who had been calculating since before Reeve was born. "Your Majesty." Cyrene's gaze lifted. The man rose from his place, tall, heavy-shouldered, ears thick with the family rings of Kor, black robes lined with red, the face of a man who had buried wives and rivals and remembered exactly how deep he had buried each one. Lord Valen Kor, the father of Lady Mirelle. "Your Majesty," he said again, "with respect. Speak, Valen. This selection cannot stand." The ambassador did not know. He could not have known. To bind you to a stranger's hand on the basis of an ignorance is not law. It is accident. The law does not distinguish. With respect, my queen, the law was not written for accidents of this magnitude. Then perhaps, Cyrene said, the law should have anticipated me. A ripple went through the hall. She had not raised her voice. She had not needed to. "My queen," Valen's tone had cooled, "surely you do not propose to honor a selection made by a human who cannot tell a queen from a candidate." "I propose," Cyrene said, "to honor the law of my own house. I stood among the candidates. I spoke when addressed." The ambassador placed his hand upon my shoulder. "The selection is valid by every word that has been written by every queen and king who has sat this throne." She turned slowly to look at Reeve. His hand had finally slipped from her shoulder. "However," she said, "the law also provides for a courtship period, 30 days, in which both parties may determine whether the blind selection has merit. At the end of those 30 days, either party may withdraw." Reeve found his voice. "Either party." "Either," she said, "so I can apologize and go home." "You can," she said. "You can withdraw at any moment in those 30 days. You will be permitted to leave with a diplomatic mistake on the record, but no permanent binding. That is the law's mercy." Valen's eyes glittered. "Your Majesty, the diplomatic mistake will follow him. It will follow Earth. It will follow your reign." "Yes," Cyrene said. "It will. That is what choices do, Lord Valen." Reeve looked at her. Her eyes were on him, steady, honey gold, watching to see what he would do. He could withdraw. He could apologize. He could blame the blindfold. He could blame the briefing. He could climb into a transport and be back on Earth in 17 humming hours and never have to think about this again, except for the rest of his life. He thought about the conversation under the blindfold. He thought about a voice that had asked him kindly, what he missed most. He thought about Marcus Lehrer. He thought about how every single one of his mistakes had been a mistake of running away from being seen. "I don't withdraw," he heard himself say. The hall went very quiet. "Ambassador," Siren said, "I made my choice. I'd like to see where it leads. You understand what you are agreeing to. 30 days of court scrutiny, every conversation analyzed, every gesture judged by people who do not want you here." "I understand." "Why?" "Because," he said, "you asked me a question I haven't been asked in 3 years, and I'd like to find out what else you'd ask me." She did not answer for a very long moment. Valen on his balcony did not move. The hall did not move. A servant somewhere coughed politely and was instantly hushed. Then Siren raised one slim hand, and a servant brought the ceremonial wine cups forward, and she pressed one into Reeves' hand. Their fingers brushed. Up close, he could see what he had missed, the smallest tremor at the corner of her mouth. He realized, terrified. He had not been the only one. "To unexpected choices," she said, and lifted her cup. "To the fools who make them," he answered, and lifted his. They drank. The wine tasted of warm starlight and bitter regret, and the smallest, sweetest thread of something Reeve did not have a name for. The hall very slowly, very unevenly began to applaud. Some of it was genuine. Most of it was obligatory. All of it was uncertain. Siren leaned in, close enough that only he could hear. "You did not know it was me," she said. "Did you? Truly? Truly? You should have known." "Yes." The robes, the position, the way the hall went still. "I know. You are either the worst diplomat in human history or accidentally extraordinary. I genuinely don't know which. Perhaps both. Perhaps neither. We have 30 days to find out." She straightened. The royal mask slid back over her face, and she was queen again, but he had seen what was underneath. He had seen her terrified. He had seen her hoping. "Aldrin," she said. "Yes, my queen. Take the ambassador to the guest quarters. He looks pale. He has had an unusual afternoon." "Yes, my queen." She turned to go. She stopped. She looked back at Reeve over her shoulder, and her eyes met his, and she said one more thing, quietly, only for him. "I hope you are as brave with your eyes open as you were with them closed." She walked away. The hall did not breathe until the throne room doors closed behind her. Aldrin took Reeves' elbow. The old man's hand was shaking. "Ambassador." "Aldrin, you should not be in this hallway long." "I know." "Lord Valancourt is the son of the king's father's brother. He is the last male blood of the old royal line. His daughter, Lady Morel, would have been the most acceptable politically of all 7 candidates. He has waited many years for this ceremony. I gathered. He will not forget that you stepped between his daughter and her queen." Reeve looked at him. The old man's ears were trembling. "Aldrin, why are you shaking?" "I am old, ambassador. You weren't shaking an hour ago." Aldrin did not answer. He guided Reeve down a long crystal hallway, past whispering nobles who fell silent as they passed past servants who curtsied too low and rose too slowly, past a small alcove where a foil wrapper from a caramel had been set on the stone floor with great care, smooth flat, as if it were a sacred thing. Reeve slowed. He almost stopped. He saw in the shadow of a column a small face, tall ears for the small head, bark brown eyes wide as moons. The boy was watching him. The boy was watching him with an expression Reeve did not understand. Not gratitude, not fear, something else, something that almost looked like recognition, as if the boy had been waiting for someone exactly like Reeve to walk this hallway for a very long time. Aldrin's hand tightened on Reeve's elbow. "Come, Ambassador," he said. "We must hurry." But Aldrin's voice was shaking now too, and somewhere far above them, on a balcony where Reeve could not see Lord Valon Kor, stood with his hand on his daughter's shoulder and his mouth at her jeweled ear, and he was already beginning to whisper. Part 2. The guest quarters had a window. The window had a view. The view had 3 moons. Reeve sat on the edge of a bed that was too soft and stared at the moons and tried to remember how to breathe like a man who had not just accidentally proposed marriage to a sovereign. He failed because his hands were shaking, because his hands had been shaking since the throne room, because somewhere in this palace right now, 300 nobles were trying to figure out what to do with him. And somewhere in this palace right now, Lord Valon Kor was whispering into a daughter's jeweled ear. Reeve looked down at his palm, the palm that had touched a queen. He wiped it on his knee, twice, hard, as if dust were the problem. A knock at the door. He flinched. Yes. "Captain Vesna," said a voice through the wood. "I'm escorting you to breakfast." "Breakfast?" "Yes, Ambassador. The Queen has invited you. In 1 hour. I am here to make sure you arrive at the correct dining hall and not the laundry. The palace has a habit of swallowing strangers." He almost laughed. He opened the door. The soldier from the semicircle stood in the corridor, out of her ceremonial robe, in a clean, dark uniform that fit her like she had been born in it. Her ears were ringed in nothing fancy, service marks, nothing more. She looked at him. She looked tired. "You chose her," Vesna said. "I did. I want you to know I have not been ordered to be polite to you." "Noted. I also want you to know I am going to be polite to you anyway, because my father is shouting at me, and I want him to keep shouting. He shouts louder when he is losing." Reeve laughed. It came out cracked. It came out real. "Captain Vesna, Ambassador, I think I like you." "I think most people do," she said. "Eventually, after they get over the part where I want to throw them out an airlock." She turned on her heel. "Walk faster, Ambassador. We have a queen to feed." The dining hall was not a hall. It was a courtyard, open to the violet sky. Vines climbed the crystal walls. Strange flowers nodded their bell-shaped heads. A small fountain ran water sideways across a low stone basin. 2 chairs, 1 table, 1 queen. Siren was already seated. She had not dressed up. That was the first thing Reeve noticed. She wore a soft gray robe, no jewels at her ears. Her silver hair was loose down her back, not braided, not crowned. She looked for a moment like a woman who lived in a house with a garden. She looked for a moment like a person. She did not stand when he entered. She gestured to the chair across from her. "Sit, Ambassador. I have already poured the tea. It is too hot. We have time to be quiet before we have to be clever." He sat. He did not know what to do with his hands. He put them in his lap. He took them out. He put one on the table. He took it off. "Calder." "Yes." "Stop." He stopped. She poured a second cup. The steam rose between them. "I would like," she said, "to apologize." "For what?" "For yesterday. I tested you. I did not warn you. I used my own throne room as a laboratory. You had no idea what the experiment was. That was not fair." "It wasn't fair." "No. It was also kind of impressive." She blinked. "Excuse me. I have been on the receiving end of a lot of tests in my career," he said. "Most of them, the testers did not show up themselves. They sent assistants. They sent paperwork. You came down off your throne. You stood in line. That is, That is not nothing. She watched him. You are not what I was led to expect. What were you led to expect? A man trying to recover his career, a polished talker, someone who would choose the prettiest voice and make a small political joke about it later. I am all of those things on Tuesdays. She laughed. He took a sip of the tea. It tasted like a memory of pine. Siren. She looked up sharply. He had not used the title. Forgive me, he said, Your Majesty. No, use my name. In here, when we are alone like this, I have not had a person use my name in a very long time. Siren. Yes, I do not know how to do this. Do what? Be courted by a queen for 30 days while the planet watches and a man named Valen Kor sharpens something. She set her cup down. Then she said we will do it together, badly, at first, until we are slightly less bad. That is the most diplomatic thing anyone has said to me in years. I am a diplomat, among other things. What other things? She picked up her tea again. I will tell you, she said, slowly, over 30 days, if you stay. He met the boy again that afternoon. He had asked for a tour of the gardens because he could not stand the inside of his guest room and because he had been told there were earth sunflowers somewhere on the grounds. The gardens were larger than the city he had grown up in. He walked alone. Aldrin had been asked to accompany him. Aldrin had bowed. Aldrin had pleaded a headache. Aldrin had not met his eyes. Reeve had noticed. He had stored it somewhere he was trying not to look at. The sunflowers were in a small dome at the back of the garden, behind a hedge of pale blue, not quite lilac. Lady Nera's research dome, he assumed. The plants grew in straight rows, 3 feet tall, their faces lifted toward an artificial sun. He stood in the dome. He breathed. It smelled like Iowa. He had never been to Iowa. He had just always assumed that Iowa smelled like sunflowers. He hoped he was right. A small sound. He turned. The boy was crouched between 2 rows, small hands cupped around a flower stem, careful not crushing. The big bark brown eyes lifted. The tall ears went very still. The boy started to scramble up, to run. Hey, Reeve said, soft. Hey, it's all right. I'm not going to tell anyone. The boy froze. Are you allowed to be here? The boy shook his head. I won't tell. The boy stared at him. I won't tell, Reeve said again. What's your name? A long pause. Tomir, the boy said. His voice was very small. Tomir. Yes. My name is Reeve. I know. You know. Everyone knows. Right, of course. The thing, in the hall. Tomir kept staring. Reeve crouched down. His knees did not love this. His knees were 38 years old and had spent a great many of those years sitting in chairs. But he crouched anyway. He brought his face level with the boy's face. He smiled. Tomir, the candy yesterday. Did you eat it? The boy nodded. Was it good? The boy nodded harder. Good, Reeve said. I have one more, in my pocket. Would you like it? The boy's eyes got very large. Reeve pulled the foil square out. He set it on the soil between them. He did not hand it over. He had a feeling suddenly that this boy did not take things from hands. Not anymore. Whatever life had taught him to take things from the ground. The small fingers darted out. The foil disappeared into a pocket. Thank you, sir. Reeve. Sir. Reeve. The boy almost smiled. It was not quite a smile. It was the beginning of one. It was an expression that had been started a long time ago and had not been finished. Reeve, the boy said. Reeve felt something pinch behind his ribs. He did not know why. He did not in that moment want to know why. The first week passed, then the second. Reeve learned the palace. He learned that the great hall changed color with the time of day, that the floors lit your next step like a hint, that the food was almost always 1 degree too cold by tradition because cold food was supposed to slow conversation and force people to talk to each other, that the noble women laughed by tilting their ears, the noble men by tilting their chins. That Vaillancourt laughed with neither. He had dinner with Sirene every night, sometimes in the open courtyard, sometimes in a small room behind the throne hall with a low table and floor cushions and a fire that burned a strange clean blue. She asked questions. She asked them in a way no one had ever asked them before. What had he been like as a child? Had he loved his mother more, or his father, or both equally, or had he not known the difference? Had he ever owned a dog? What did he believe in when he was 20? What did he believe in now? Had he ever knelt to pick up a tray for someone simply because she had dropped it? He did not know the answer to that last one. You did, she said. On the first day, Aldrin told me. Did Aldrin tell you because he was reporting on me? He told me because he liked you. It is not the same thing. He thought about that. He kept that one too. In return, he asked her things. What did she believe in? What did she eat when nobody was watching her eat? Did she ever lie about how she was feeling? Had she loved her husband? She did not answer the last one for 2 days. On the third night she answered, I respected him, she said. He was a good king. He was a kind man. He chose me when I was 19 because my father had useful trade ties to 3 colony worlds and because my mother had taught me which fork to use at every kind of state dinner that had been invented up to that point. He was 43. I was 19. He treated me with great care. Care, yes, that is not the same word as love. She looked at him over her wine. No, she said, it is not. He waited. We were good partners, she said. We were not in love. We were not even in the human sense of that word. We were colleagues who shared a bed 3 nights of the 7 and a throne every morning and a great fondness for the same kind of bread. He died when I was 31. I have been queen alone for 12 years. I have done it well. I have done it correctly. And in 12 years, Reeve, no one has asked me a single question that was not a question about what I would do for my people. He did not know what to say to that, so he said the only true thing he could think of. What is your favorite kind of bread? She laughed. The laugh broke something in her face, something tight that had been held for a long time. There is a bread, she said, from the lower city, a flat, sweet kind, with a seed on top that bursts on the tongue. I have not eaten it in 8 years. Why? Because queens do not go to the lower city for bread. Tomorrow, Reeve said, we go. She stared at him. Reeve, tomorrow, disguise, hood, whatever. We go, we get the bread, we come back. Nobody dies. I have done this before. I once snuck a Secretary of State out of a state dinner to get street food. It went famously. Reeve, yes, I am the sovereign of 7 worlds. Yes, I cannot just go out for bread. Then I will go for you. She looked at him for a very long moment. You would do that. Sirene, I would do almost anything to see you laugh at a piece of bread. Her eyes did something he could not quite read. She reached across the low table. She covered his hand with hers, just for a second, just for the time it takes to breathe in once and out again. Then she withdrew her hand, and she said quietly, Bring me bread, ambassador. He went the next day. He wore a borrowed cloak. He pulled the hood low. He looked, he was sure, exactly like a 6-foot human ambassador wearing a borrowed cloak with a hood pulled low. He fooled no one, but he went. He came back with 2 loaves of flat sweetbread with bursting seeds on top. He set them on the low table. She tore one in half. She bit it. She closed her eyes. For one full breath, Queen Seren of 7 worlds was a girl of 19 again, sitting in a lower city bakery. Before, she had been chosen by a king. When she opened her eyes, they were wet. Reeve, yes. Do not tell anyone. Tell anyone what? That a queen cried over bread. I would never. She laughed, he laughed. And in a corner of the room, the small, clear flame of the strange blue fire burned on, and outside the window, the moons turned in their slow, careful dance, and nothing in the universe was wrong for one perfect minute. It was day 12. The trouble started on day 12. The state welcome feast. 300 nobles, the diplomatic corps of 2 off-world embassies, television crews from the inner colonies, a long table, a floating throne, a queen at one end and an ambassador at the other. The room was beautiful. The wine was beautiful. The wine was the problem. It was poured into Sirene's cup by a servant Reeve did not recognize. He noticed. He noticed because he had been watching the servants ever since the small old woman with the tray, because diplomats who did not watch servants tended to eat condiments by the bowl, and because something in him had been tuned for danger his whole life. The new servant did not bow correctly. The new servant's hand shook. The wine in Sirene's cup was the wrong color, not by much, by a hair, by the smallest shade. Wine on Valtora was supposed to glow faintly green at the rim. Sirene's cup was glowing yellow. Reeve set down his fork. His throat went very dry. He had 3 seconds. She was lifting the cup. She was smiling at Lord Valencourt, who had risen to make a toast to a 30-day courtship that he would not have minded ending in the next 30 seconds. She was smiling at him. She was bringing the cup to her lips. Sirene, Reeve said. He said it quietly. He did not stand. He did not shout. He just said her name in the tone he had used at midnight 3 nights ago when he had told her about Iowa, and she stopped because no one in the hall was supposed to use her name like that. She looked at him. He flicked his eyes to her cup, just his eyes. Her hand froze. Lord Valencourt's smile at the head of the table did not move. It did not move because it was painted on. It did not move because Lord Valencourt had been schooled since childhood to hold the smile he had decided to hold. Reeve stood up. "Forgive me," he said. "My queen, I believe there is a draft on this side of the table. May I trade cups with you?" A small ripple in the hall, a faux pas, a diplomatic absurdity. You did not trade cups with the queen. She handed him her cup. He handed her his. He did it in front of 300 people. He did it in front of the television crews. He did it in front of Lord Valencourt's painted smile. He raised the cup that had been hers. He looked Valen in the eye. "To the Queen's health," he said. He brought the cup to his lips. He stopped just before the rim touch. He set the cup back down. He smiled. "Forgive me," he said. "I have just remembered. Earth physicians have asked me not to drink Valtoran wine after sundown. It interferes with my medication." The hall did not breathe. Sirene's hand was steady on his cup. Lord Valencourt's smile stayed where it had been told to stay. Captain Vesna, 3 seats down from Reeve, very quietly slid her hand to her side. Reeve was almost certain her hand had found a weapon. He was almost certain that was on purpose. A servant, white-faced, rushed forward to remove the cup. Reeve covered it with his hand. "Leave it," he said softly. "I would like the kitchen master to look at this cup, personally, tonight." The servant fled. Lord Valencourt inclined his head very slightly toward Reeve. "Ambassador," he said, "how careful you are." "Yes," Reeve said, "I find that a man who has made one large mistake tends to be careful about the next ones." Valen's painted smile widened. It was the smile of a man who had just been told he had a worthy enemy. It was the worst kind of smile in the world. The cup tested positive for Nairobian distillate. Tasteless, odorless, lethal in doses smaller than a tear. The servant who had poured it was not found. The servant who had poured it was by tomorrow morning very thoroughly dead in a service alley behind the palace kitchens. The official report listed natural causes. Captain Vesna, who had personally examined the body, told Reeve in a low voice that natural causes did not usually leave bruises on the throat in the shape of 5 fingers. "He had a family," Reeve said. "He did. He was paid to do it. He was paid to do it. By Ambassador. By." Captain Vesna looked at him. "I have no proof," she said. But, yes, Ambassador. Core. Of course, core. Everyone in this palace knows it is core. No one will ever prove it. He is the last male blood of the old royal line. The court will not move against him without iron evidence. And iron evidence has a strange habit of vanishing in this palace before it reaches the queen. Reeve closed his eyes. He thought about Marcus Lehrer. He thought about the cost of saying the loud, true thing. He thought with a new and terrible clarity that he had not come to this palace to escape anything. He had come to it to learn finally how to stay. That night Sirene came to his door, not in a state robe, in a plain dark dress, no jewelry, her silver hair down. He let her in without speaking. She walked to his window. She stood looking out at the 3 moons. For a long time she did not say anything. "I would have died tonight," she finally said, "if you had not been watching." "Yes, Reeve, yes. No one has watched my cup in 12 years. No one, not one person. That can't be true." "It is true. Servants watch. Tasters watch. They watch for poison. They do not watch for me. They watch the cup. You watch me." He did not know what to say. He came and stood beside her. He did not touch her. He thought he should not touch her. His hand was 3 inches from hers on the cold crystal of the windowsill. She closed the 3 inches. She set her hand on top of his. She did not look at him. She just looked at the moons. "Tomorrow," she said, "Valencourt will hold a press conference. He will try to break you. He has been told something. Something from Earth. Something old. He thinks it will end you. He thinks the planet will demand that I dismiss you. He is wrong about that. But I want you to know before it comes that whatever he says tomorrow, I have already decided." "Decided what?" "That a man who watches a queen's cup is the kind of man I would like to keep alive." He looked at her. She did not look at him. Her hand on his was warm. He turned his hand under hers so that they were palm to palm. She closed her fingers around his. They stood like that at the window watching 3 moons rise and rise. She did not stay. She left after a long time with her fingers brushing his at the door and a small look back over her shoulder that he was going to remember for the rest of his life. He did not sleep. He stood at the window until dawn. He understood somewhere in the 2nd hour of standing that he had stopped wanting to leave. Day 14, the press conference. It was held in the Great Hall. It was held with the television crews still in the city. It was held with the off-world ambassadors still seated in the front row. It was held very precisely on the public stage Lord Vaillancourt had spent 12 years building for exactly this kind of moment. Reeve sat at Sirene's right hand. He did not look at Valen. Valen stood at a low podium below the floating throne. He held a single piece of crystal paper. He read from it slowly. He read the name Marcus Lair. He read the date. He read the press cycle. He read the resignation. He read the bottle of pills. He read all of it. He looked up. He smiled the painted smile. "My queen," he said, "our queen. We do not blame the man we host. We blame the man we did not know. Ambassador Calder has presented himself to us as a representative of his species. He has not told us that his last act of representation killed a 61-year-old colleague with his mouth." The hall was completely silent. Sirene did not look at Reeve. She did not need to. She looked at Valen. She let him stand in his painted smile for a count of 3. Then she stood up. She walked slowly down the steps from her throne. She walked past Valen. She walked into the open floor of the hall. She turned in the place where Reeve had once stood, blindfolded, and she faced her court. Her voice, when it came, was low. It carried. "You have been told," she said, "the story of Marcus Lair. You have not been told the rest. You have not been told that Ambassador Calder, after the death of his colleague, requested a hardship posting to a system that no other diplomat would accept. He did not request a comfortable post. He did not request a quiet one. He requested the post most likely to remove him from polite Earth society so that he might not, in his own words, break anything new. You have not been told that he wept at his colleague's grave alone on a Tuesday 6 months ago in a coat too thin for the weather. You have not been told that he carries this man's photograph in his case file, not as evidence, as penance. The hall did not breathe. Reeve did not breathe. He had not told her any of that. She had found out, and she had kept it, and she had brought it into this hall like a sword. You will not, Sirene said, use a dead man to break a living one. Not in my court, not in my reign. We do not weaponize grief on Valtora, not even when the grief is foreign. We weep with the bereaved, and then we let them stand. She turned, slowly. She looked at Lord Vaillancourt. Her honey gold eyes had gone hard. My Lord Court, she said, sit down. He sat down. The painted smile cracked. For one fraction of 1 second, Reeve saw the face underneath. It was not a face he wanted to see again. That night, Aldrin Therill knocked on his door. It was late. The corridor was empty. The old man's ears were trembling so badly that the jewelry at their tips made the smallest possible sound, like distant rain on a window. Ambassador, Aldrin, come in. I cannot come in. Then I will come out. He stepped into the corridor. The old man would not meet his eyes. Ambassador, Aldrin said, I cannot say long. I have come to say one thing, and then I must go, because if I am seen here, I am dead, and others with me. Aldrin, what? He has my granddaughter. What? He has my granddaughter, Ambassador, and my son. He took them 2 years ago. They live on a colony in the third belt. They are alive. They are alive only as long as I do exactly what he asks of me. I am sorry. I am so sorry. I have been sorry for 2 years. Reeve felt the floor tilt. He did not move. He kept his face very still. Aldrin. He told me to write the report about Marcus Lair. He told me to plant it, to leak it to the inner colony press, to bring it to him at the right moment. I did. I did all of it. I have done all of it. For 2 years, every small treachery I could be asked to perform, I have performed. I have watched you, Ambassador. I have. I have come to like you, and I have helped him plan things that would kill you. Both of these things are true. I cannot live with either of them anymore." The old man was crying. He was crying without sound. The tears were running down both sides of his long, thin face, and his ears were trembling, and his hands were knotted together at his belt, and he was the saddest man Reeve had ever seen. "Aldrin, I have not come to be forgiven. I know. I have come to ask you to end me before the Queen finds out, because if she finds out by any other route, she will be forced by law to execute me, and the moment she gives the order, my granddaughter dies. He has standing orders. My granddaughter dies in the same hour. Aldrin, please, Ambassador, I am too old to do it myself. My hands will not. Please end me. Tonight, tell her you found me trying to poison her. Tell her anything. Save the child. Save my child." Reeve looked at him. For a very long time, the corridor was empty. The corridor was empty, and the old man was weeping in a way that human or alien did not change. The corridor was empty, and the silence between them was full of the small, distant sound of jeweled ears trembling against each other. Reeve thought about Marcus Lehrer. He thought about the bottle of pills. He thought about the years he had spent believing that the kindest thing a man could ever do was take his secrets quietly into a quiet room. He thought with a clarity that arrived all at once that he had been wrong about that for 3 years. "Aldrin, please, I am not going to do that. Ambassador, listen to me. Aldrin, look at me. Look at me." The old man looked up. "I am not going to do what you are asking. I am going to do the harder thing. We are going to tell her, together, tomorrow, with a plan. We are going to save your granddaughter. We are going to save your son. We are going to break him before he can break us. And I am going to need you to be alive to do it. She will execute me. She will not. She is bound by law. She is also bound by sense, and by the woman I have been having dinner with for 14 days. I do not believe that woman would execute you for the crime of loving a child enough to do something terrible. I believe she will see what I see. Aldrin, I believe she will see." The old man's hands came up to his face. He held himself. He held himself with the careful gentleness of a man who had not been held in a very long time. Reeve put a hand on his shoulder. He thought of his own father dead 19 years. He thought of the way grief looks the same in any language. "Aldrin," he said, "tomorrow, tomorrow, together, together." The old man bowed. He bowed lower than Reeve had ever seen anyone bow. Then he turned and he walked away down the long corridor, and his shadow grew longer and longer on the crystal floor. Reeve stood in the empty hallway. He looked at his hand, the hand that had touched a queen, the hand that had not done what an old man begged it to do. He felt very tired and very awake at the same time. He turned to go back into his rooms. He stopped, because at the far end of the corridor, in the shadow of a column, very small and very still, a boy with tall ears was watching him. The boy did not move. The boy did not speak. The boy lifted one small hand. He pressed it flat against his own small chest. Then he turned, and he was gone. Reeve stood in the corridor a long time. He did not understand what he had just seen, but somewhere in the part of him that had once knelt to pick up a tray, somewhere in the part of him that had once put a caramel on the ground for a boy who would not take it from a hand, he understood that something had been promised to him. He did not know what it was. He was about to find out. Part 3. Dawn came in pale and slow. Reeve had not slept. He stood at his window, watching the 3 moons fade, watching the violet sky turn the color of old silver, watching the palace gardens come up from the dark in pieces. He had a plan. The plan was thin. The plan was the kind of thing you wrote on a napkin and then tried to live through. He looked at his hand. He flexed it once. Then he walked out the door, down the corridor, past 2 servants who curtsied, too low past a guard who pretended not to see him, and into the open courtyard where a queen drank her morning tea alone. Sirene looked up. She read his face in a heartbeat. "Sit down, ambassador." He sat. "What?" "Sirene, tell me," he told her. He told her everything. Aldrin, the granddaughter, the son, the Third Belt Colony, 2 years of small treacheries, the leak about Marcus Lehrer, the cup of yellow wine, the standing order that meant a child would die the moment a queen gave the order she was bound by law to give. He told her without flinching. He told her because for 3 years he had practiced the wrong silence, and this morning he was practicing the right speech. She listened. Her face did not move. When he was finished, she set her cup down, carefully, carefully, like the cup contained the rest of her self-control. "Reeve, yes, you are asking me to break my own law. I am asking you to outthink it. That is the same thing in a softer dress. Yes, you are also asking me," she said, "to trust an old man who has been feeding my enemy for 2 years. Yes, and you are asking me to trust you, to bring this to me without proof, without leverage, without a single witness besides your own face." "Yes." She looked at him for a long moment, honey gold eyes, the smallest line between her brows. "Why did you not do what he asked?" He thought about that. He thought about how to answer it. He chose the truth. Because 3 years ago, he said, a man named Marcus Lehrer chose silence rather than let his story be told. I have spent every day since wishing he had told it. I have spent every day since wishing someone had been in a corridor with him at midnight and told him to live. I will not be on the wrong side of that corridor twice in one lifetime. Sirene's eyes closed for one full breath. When she opened them, the small line between her brows was gone. "Tell me your plan, ambassador," he told her. She did not interrupt. When he was done, she said one word, "Vesna." He nodded. "Vesna." Captain Vesna heard the plan in the small fire-lit room behind the throne hall. She did not speak for a long time. She stared into the strange blue flame. She said, "I have 11 people I trust on this planet. 6 of them are off-world right now. 3 are in the lower city. 2 are in this room." "That is enough," Sirene said. "It is not enough. It will have to be." Vesna looked at Reeve. "You understand if this fails, we all hang." "Yes, you understand if it works. He has 100 Valon cores waiting behind him. We break him today. We are still fighting tomorrow." "Yes, you understand," Vesna said slowly, "that you do not have to be in this fight. You are an ambassador. You have an off-world ship. You could be on it in 11 minutes. Reeve looked at her. He thought about the 3rd moon rising every night outside his window. He thought about a queen who had not been able to take off her crown in 12 years. He thought about an old woman with a tray. He thought about a boy who had pressed his hand to his own chest. "Captain Vesna," he said, "I have spent 3 years on a ship trying to leave Earth. I am done with ships. She almost smiled. She caught it before it finished. "Then sit down, Ambassador," she said. "We have work to do." They had 15 days. 15 days to make a child appear out of plain sight. 15 days to make a record speak. 15 days to look every morning at breakfast as if nothing in the universe had changed. Reeve learned to live 2 lives at once. In the daylight, he was an ambassador on the back half of a courtship. He walked the gardens with Cyrene. He attended a small concert in the lower hall. He sat across from a noble named Lord Halen at a state lunch and did not blink when the man asked with elaborate politeness whether Earth had begun to grieve its dead more publicly these days. In the dark, he was something else. He met with Vesna in the firelit room. He listened to Aldrin's voice, soft and ruined, telling a recorder everything it had been told for 2 patient years. He memorized the face of the new servant who had been hired 6 days ago by a steward who answered to a steward who answered to a steward who answered 3 rooms down to a man with a painted smile. The boy with tall ears was the part that surprised him. Tomir Therell. Aldrin had hidden the child in plain sight under the Queen's own roof for 2 years. Cyrene, who watched servants when no one else did, had known about him for 1. She had quietly built a small life around him. A bed in the kitchen wing, a teacher who came twice a week, a wooden bird on a string above his small pillow. She had never told Aldrin she knew. She had only watched, the way she watched cups. When she finally said the boy's name out loud in front of Reeve 2 hours before the final banquet, she said it with a kind of careful pride. "Tomir," she said. She knelt down. The Queen of 7 Worlds knelt down on the polished floor of her own private hall. "Will you do something brave for me tonight?" The boy looked at her with the same expression Reeve had seen in the garden and in the dark corridor and in the gallery shadow. Recognition, trust, the unhurried, terrible patience of a child who had been waiting for a long time to be asked. "Yes, my queen," he said. The 30th day banquet was a tradition older than the throne. It marked the end of a courtship period. It marked the moment when both parties could withdraw, or could declare, in front of the entire court, with wine, with witnesses, with the full weight of Valtorian law dropping into place behind whatever was said. Vaillancourt had planned the banquet himself. He had planned the seating. He had planned the music. He had planned the floral arrangements. He had planned very carefully the moment when the Queen would rise, the moment when she would either choose her ambassador or set him down, the moment when, regardless of her choice, a knife was going to come out of the crowd and find her heart, because either way, he won. If she withdrew, he had broken her selection. His daughter could be brought forward in a new ceremony. The line of Kor could finally, after 12 patient years, return to the throne it had been promised at birth. If she did not withdraw, she would be dead before she finished her sentence. The court would be in chaos. The blame would fall on the ambassador, the foreigner, the man whose people had already proved themselves untrustworthy. Valen, in the absence of the Queen, would step forward as the closest male blood of the old royal line. Either way, he won. He had planned it for 12 years. He had not planned for Reeve Calder. The hall filled at dusk. 300 nobles, the same 300 who had watched a blindfolded ambassador make the worst possible choice 30 days ago. The off-world ambassadors, the television crews, the diplomatic corps, the minor princes from 3 colony worlds, the full ceremonial guard. The hall was full, the hall hummed, the crystalline dome pulsed with that quiet, bone-deep light that matched the breath of a watching crowd. Reeve walked in beside Siren. She wore white. She had not worn white in 12 years. White was a Valtoran color of choosing, not of mourning, not of state, of one person in one moment electing the next part of her own life. She wore no jewelry at her ears. She wore her hair down. The hall stared. The hall did not breathe. Valon Kor, in the seat reserved for the second eldest blood of the royal line, smiled the painted smile. He believed he was about to win. He had every reason to believe. He did not yet know that 2 corridors over in a quiet room with a low table and a single candle, an old man named Aldrin Thorell was sitting across from Captain Vesna, with a small recording disc set carefully on the table between them, and that Aldrin Thorell, after 2 years of carrying his terror alone, had spent the last 15 days saying, finally, the whole truth out loud. He did not yet know that 30 minutes ago, a fast, unmarked transport had cleared the upper atmosphere over the Third Belt Colony, and that on that transport were 6 of Captain Vesna's 11 trusted, and that they had a child's name and a man's name and a small location pulled from Aldrin's shaking hands. He did not yet know that the boy with tall ears, the boy Reeve had given a caramel to on the first day, had been seen by precisely one person in this palace for 2 patient years, and that the person who had seen him was a queen who watched servants when no one else did. Valon Kor did not know any of this. Valon Kor was about to find out. The banquet moved, course after course. Music, polite laughter, the shimmer of the diplomatic corps trying very hard to look as if nothing strange were about to happen. Reeve sat at Sirene's right hand. He ate almost nothing. He watched the servants. He watched the corners. He watched the small high gallery above the floor where 2 of Vesna's people stood at attention in uniforms borrowed from a wing of the guard that was technically off duty. He felt the moment before it came. It was a feeling he had learned somewhere in the last 30 days to trust. Siren, beside him, set down her cup. She rose. The hall rose with her. She walked slowly to the small open space in the floor where she had stood 30 days ago and told a painted smile to sit down. She turned to face her court. Her voice was low. It carried. On this 30th day, she said, the law gives me the right to declare or to withdraw. She paused. Valon Kor was very still in his chair. His right hand was resting on the table. His left hand was Reeve. Notice not. His left hand was hidden in his lap, under the rich black sleeve, in the loose fold of his robe, where a small signal, a small flick of the fingers would carry across the hall to a servant who had been hired 6 days ago for exactly this evening. Reeve had memorized that servant's face. The servant was standing 2 feet behind Siren, carrying a tray. The tray had a single goblet on it. The goblet in his free hand would be the prop. The other hand, the one currently held loose at the small of his back, was already 3 inches from the place a knife would be drawn from. Reeve did not have a weapon. He had not been allowed a weapon in the dining hall. He had not asked for one. He had something better. He had 30 days of practice in watching the corners of a room. Siren began to speak. I have walked, she said, 30 days beside a stranger. Valen's left hand moved, just a fraction, a small flick. Behind Siren, the servant's free hand began the small arc backward toward the hidden draw. Reeve was already moving. He had been moving since the flick. He had in fact been moving since 2 minutes before the flick, because he had seen Valen's shoulder tighten and he had been counting down from 60 in his head, and he had already shifted his weight forward on the balls of his feet at 60, 50, 40, 30. He moved. He came up out of his chair. He took 2 steps. He hit Siren in the side hard with his shoulder the way his brother had taught him to hit a wave on a board on a green dawn beach a lifetime ago, and he wrapped his arms around her, and he took her down to the polished crystal floor, and they went down together, and there was a sound behind them like the small tear of silk. Pain bloomed in his shoulder, white, hot, a line, not a stab. The knife had caught him across the back of the shoulder as he dropped, not the front of the queen's chest where it had been aimed. The hall screamed. 300 voices. Siren was under him. Her honey gold eyes were 2 inches from his. She was breathing fast. She was not hurt. She was looking at him with an expression he was going to remember in his last breath. He looked up. The servant with the empty knife hand was already being driven to the ground by 2 of Vesna's people who had crossed the room in the time it took for Reeve to fall. The knife clattered on the crystal floor. It was very small. It was very thin. The blade was yellow. The blade had been dipped in Nairobian distillate, the same poison as the cup. Valon Kaur at the head table rose to his feet. His painted smile was gone. In its place was the face Reeve had seen for half a second under the smile. The face was very calm. The face was already calculating its way out. He raised his voice. "An assassin," he said, "among the servants. My queen, we must clear the hall. We must restore order. Permit me to call the senior guard who answer to my house and may be relied upon." The hall held its breath. The senior guard, who answered to the house of Kaur, who were stationed this evening in the 3 corridors that led out of the hall. It was a beautiful sentence. It was the sentence of a man who had spent 12 years learning to write sentences exactly like it. Siren, on the floor with Reeve still half over her, opened her mouth to answer. She did not have to, because a small, clear voice cut across the hall. "He paid the servant." The hall did not breathe. The voice came from the gallery above. Reeve looked up. So did everyone else, standing at the rail of the upper gallery, with his small hands flat on the polished stone, with his tall ears straight up. For the first time Reeve had ever seen them was Tamir Thurell. He was clean. He had been bathed. Someone had brushed his hair. He was wearing a small, clean tunic of dark red. Beside him, with a hand on his small shoulder, stood Captain Vesna. Behind Vesna, in the gallery shadow, stood Aldrin Thurell. Aldrin was holding a recorder. The recorder was already playing. It played for 1 full minute. It played a low voice, the low voice of a man Reeve had heard many times. It played orders. It played dates. It played a name and an address on a 3rd belt colony. It played a small, kind weeping late at night of an old man who had been asked to do another small, unspeakable thing and had said yes again because there was a child. The voice on the recorder was Valon Kaur's. The voice on the recorder did not bother with painted smiles. The hall listened. The hall listened to 30 seconds, 40, a full minute. Valon Kaur's face did not move. Valon Kaur's left hand moved. He drew from inside his robe a small, flat thing, the color of his sleeve, a blade, a last one, for the queen, for himself, for whichever came first. Reeve was still on the floor. Reeve was too far. Captain Vesna in the gallery did not move. Captain Vesna did not have to, because Lady Morel Kaur, in her father's daughter's chair, 3 feet from her father's right hand, stood up. She put her hand on her father's wrist. She did not let go. "Father," she said. That was all she said. He looked at her. His face for 1 full second was an old man's face, an old man who had loved one thing in his life that was not power, an old man who had taught a small daughter to read on his knee, an old man who had built every plan he had ever built in some small, unadmitted corner of his heart for her. His hand opened. The blade fell. Captain Vesna's people were on him before it hit the crystal floor. There was a long quiet. Reeve helped Siren stand. She was not hurt. Her white dress was streaked at the side where she had hit the floor and where his blood had soaked through his sleeve and onto her hip. She did not wipe it off. She turned slowly in the center of the great hall with the would-be killer face down on the crystal, with Valon Kor on his knees, with his hands behind his head, with 300 nobles standing frozen, with the television crews recording every breath. She looked up at the gallery. She looked at the small boy with the tall ears. She lifted her hand. She said very softly, in a voice that nonetheless carried to every corner of the dome, "Come down, Tomir." He came down. He came down the long curved stair from the gallery, one careful step at a time. Captain Vesna walked behind him. Aldrin Therrell walked behind Vesna. They came across the polished crystal floor. They stopped in front of the queen. The boy looked up at her. He looked up at her with the same expression Reeve had seen in the hallway. Not gratitude, not fear, recognition. Siren knelt down. A queen on the polished floor of her own great hall knelt down to a child. The hall did not breathe. She put her hand on his small shoulder. "Tomir, yes, my queen. Will you tell them what you told me?" He looked for one small second at Reeve. Then he turned back to the hall. His voice was small. It carried. "He never knew who I was," the boy said. "Lord Calder, the off-world one. He did not know I was Aldrin's grandson. He did not know I was a hidden boy. He did not know anything. He gave me a candy on the first day. He gave me another one in the garden. He spoke to me like I was a person. He did not know I would ever be useful to him. He did it when no one was watching. He did it for nothing." The boy lifted his hand. He pressed it flat against his own small chest. He looked at Reeve. "He is the one," the boy said. "He is the one my queen chose. He is the one who saw me when no one was looking." Siren rose. She turned. She faced her court. The honey gold eyes were wet. She did not wipe them. She lifted her hand. She pointed at Reeve. Her voice came from somewhere deeper than the throat. "This," she said, "is the man I chose. 30 days ago I chose him for the voice. He did not know it was me. Today I choose him for the hands. He chose to kneel for an old woman with a tray when there was nothing to gain. He chose to put candy on the ground for a boy who would not take it from a hand. He chose to watch my cup when no one in 12 years has watched my cup. He chose to refuse an old man who begged him to do a terrible thing. He chose to tell me a truth this morning that he could have buried and lived comfortably for another 30 days and quietly gone home. He chose to take the knife in the shoulder that was meant for my heart. He has chosen again and again the harder kind thing." She turned back to him. She walked to him. The hall did not breathe. She came up to him very close, and his shoulder was still bleeding through the bandage Captain Vesna had already very quickly wrapped around it, and his white shirt was very red, and the red was beginning to bloom in slow, concentric rings. She lifted her hand. She pressed it to his chest, right where his heart was, right next to the wound that had been meant for hers. "The first time," she said, "you chose me blind." She paused. She breathed. Her honey gold eyes did not leave his. "Today," she said, "I choose you with my eyes wide open." The hall did not move. The hall did not breathe. Then somewhere in the back, a single pair of old hands began to clap, slowly. Then another pair, then 100, then 300. The applause climbed up the dome and rang against the crystal walls and came back down on them like rain. Reeve put his hand over hers. He pressed it harder into his chest. He felt her pulse against his ribs. He felt his own heart answer it. He did not say anything. There was nothing to say. 3 days later, a small unmarked transport landed in a private dock on the west wing of the palace. A door opened. 2 people stepped down the ramp. An exhausted Valtoran man in his late 30s, with a beard he had grown in 2 years of captivity, holding the hand of a small, thin girl in a dress that did not fit because no one had thought to bring her clothes. Aldrin Thero at the bottom of the ramp did not move. He had been standing there for 1 hour. He had been standing there with his hands folded. When the girl saw him, she stopped. She let go of her father's hand. She walked the last 15 feet. She walked them faster and faster, and at the last 6 feet she ran, and she hit her grandfather full force around the waist, and she folded her arms around him, and she did not let go. Aldrin sank to his knees on the dock. He held her. He held her without sound. His ears were trembling so hard that the small jewels at the tips made a sound like distant rain. Reeve stood at the edge of the dock. He did not approach. This was not his moment. Behind him in the doorway, Seren put her hand on his elbow. She did not say anything. She just stood beside him. Aldrin looked up, across the dock, across the small heap of his own granddaughter in his old arms. He looked at Reeve. He bowed his head. That was all. That was everything. Lord Valencourt was tried in the Great Hall. He was tried by the full court. He was tried with the recording, with Tomir's testimony, with the body of the servant whose throat had been bruised in the shape of 5 fingers, with the cup of yellow wine, with the small flat blade, with 12 years of small treacheries that once one of them had been pulled, came up like a long root from soft soil and brought every other one with it. He did not speak in his own defense. His daughter, Lady Morel Cour, spoke. She spoke quietly. She spoke for 9 minutes. She did not defend him. She told the court who he had been when she was a child. She told them about the man who had taught her to read on his knee. She told them she did not know when exactly that man had become the man on trial. She said she had stopped recognizing him about 6 years ago, and that she had told herself she was imagining it, and that she should have told the Queen 4 years ago and had not, and that she would bear that for the rest of her life, however long she was permitted to bear anything in this court. The Queen heard her out. The Queen sentenced Lord Valencourt to exile, not death, exile, to a small monastery world on the outer edge of the third belt. No communication, no correspondence, no politics. The Queen pardoned Lady Morel. The Queen also very quietly in chambers, after the court was dismissed, asked Lady Morel if she would consider in time a position in the diplomatic corps. Lady Morel, when she could speak, said yes. Aldrin Thero was, as Reeve had promised, in a quiet corridor at midnight, not executed. The Queen on the floor of her own great hall, with 300 nobles watching, with 2 off-world embassies watching, with her television crews watching, declared formally that the law of Valtora was not made for fathers and grandfathers who acted under duress to protect children. She declared that the law could be revised in the next session of the court. She declared that the law could be examined. She declared that the law was made by people and could be remade by people. She declared finally that an old man who had carried a terror alone for 2 years and had walked into a queen's recording room and told the truth, knowing it might cost his life, was the kind of citizen a wise sovereign kept very close. She kept him. He served as her senior advisor for the next 19 years. When he died of a quiet illness in a soft bed, his granddaughter was holding one of his hands. Tomir, then 27, was holding the other. Reeve healed. The wound across his shoulder closed. It left a long, pale line, a line you could trace with one finger from the top of the scapula down toward the spine. Siren traced it many times, on many quiet evenings, in the small fire-lit room behind the throne hall, in the open courtyard with the upward fountain, in a small house eventually in the lower city that Siren owned and had not visited in 12 years, where she taught Reeve to bake the flat, sweet bread with the bursting seed on top. He was bad at it. He was bad at it for a long time. She laughed at him. She laughed at him in a way she had not laughed at anyone in her entire life. He did not mind. It was on the steps of the lower city bakery, 3 years after the day she had said, with my eyes wide open, that Reeve Calder finally asked the question he had carried in his chest since the hallway with the caramel. Siren was sitting beside him. She wore no crown. She wore a soft gray robe. Her silver hair was loose down her back. Around them, the lower city moved in its evening rhythm, children running, vendors closing carts, lights coming up in the windows above the bakery. Siren, yes. Why? Why what? Why me? She looked at him. She thought about it for a long moment. She set her bread down. Reeve, yes. I have known many polished men. I have heard 1,000 prepared speeches. I have sat at 1,000 dinners where I have been bowed to by people who would have given me their own teeth if they thought their teeth would buy them favor. None of that ever told me anything about anyone. What told you something? You, on the first day, kneeling on a polished floor to pick up cheap glass for an old servant who had been told to hurry. That's it. That is it. That's all. Reeve, that is everything. She turned to him. Anyone can be kind in a great moment. Anyone can throw himself in front of a knife. Anyone can give the long speech. But you knelt for a stranger when there was nothing in it for you. You did not even know I was watching. That kind of kindness is not performed. That kind of kindness is who you are. I chose who you are. And the rest, she said, I waited for, and the rest you did. He looked down at her hand on his. He thought about a wormhole that had bent space and 17 humming hours and a hand wiped on a knee. He thought about Marcus Lehrer. He let himself think about him. He thought for the first time in a very long time that the dead did not need him to suffer. The dead needed him to live. The dead needed him to choose every morning to walk through a corridor with his eyes open and to kneel for the next person who dropped a tray. He lifted Siren's hand to his mouth. He kissed her knuckles. He pressed her palm very gently to his chest, right next to the pale line on his shoulder, right over his heart. The blindfold came off, he said quietly, the day I learned to see myself clearly. She smiled. And you were still there. She did not say anything for a long time. She just leaned her head against his shoulder, the good shoulder, the one without the line. Above them, the first of the 3 moons rose pale over the rooftops of the lower city, and the bakery's window threw a square of warm light across the cobblestones. And somewhere down the street, a child laughed, and somewhere down the street, an old woman was carrying a careful tray of bread without dropping it, and the universe, which had been wrong in so many small ways for so many years, was for 1 perfect minute exactly right. He sat with the Queen of 7 Worlds on the steps of a bakery. He held her hand. He breathed. He was at last home.